What is up, fellow sickos? Our second bonus segment of the week. You're welcome, or I'm sorry. I don't know. We're going to talk about the Suns Jazz draft pick trade. Super fascinating. If you're watching on YouTube, you can already see the details of it. But to run through it, we're not going to exchange pleasantries this time because I know Grant is doing fantastic. The Suns traded their 2031 first round pick to the Utah Jazz for a 2025 first round pick. It is the least favorable of Cleveland, Minnesota, Utah. A 2027 first round pick, least favorable of Cleveland, Minnesota, Utah, and a 2029 first round pick, least favorable of Cleveland, Minnesota, Utah. And so to break that down even more, the Suns traded one first round pick for three least favorable first round picks that both convey more imminently. And I've seen people say like it opens up all of their drafts. It just gives them the ability to trade three first round picks. That's what it does.
Sorry. Yeah, it was Shams. Let's just say it. Like, use the word unlocks their draft. What do you mean, sir, by unlocks their draft? That doesn't do anything.
You can't trade 26, 28, and 2030 now because you just traded your 2031. So what did you unlocked the ability to trade three first round picks, which you couldn't do before. Right. You could trade one. That's what you did.
You got three new picks. That's what you did. It doesn't change. Like, I mean, like, what can you trade like portions of swaps in the even years? There's nothing. I don't know. Maybe we'll look like idiots, but like,
you can now trade because they've already like 8 times swapped. You can trade 26 and 28 now, which you couldn't do before. But it's just, it did unlock stuff, but it did not unlock. If they want draft picks and all of those drafts, okay, fine. You've now have the ability to have draft picks, get cost controlled talent. And I think we'll start there before we get into the Utah Jazz side of it all is more fascinating because I think we had this discussion in our Discord a little bit, leads to the larger conversation about, well, what is the value of trading for these distant first round picks while giving up this many guaranteed first? I want to talk about that, but we need to start with the Suns. What do you think this portends for them? And I think there are 3 different routes to go, and correct me before you choose one if you have a fourth one. It's they really just want to get cost controlled talent in here, probably the least likely one. They're trying to gear up for a Jimmy Butler trade, and the idea of trading 2 multiple first round picks is more palatable if you're a Miami team, let's say, that's still going to try and win after trading Jimmy Butler. Or are they just trying to load up to make maybe not the Jimmy Butler move, but now you're able to get, let's say you can trade Yusuf Nurkic, get off that money while also getting back a player of value because you have the first round equity to sweeten that package. Which one do you lean more towards, or is there an avenue that I didn't mention that you think they might explore?
No, I mean, we can just rule out the like, oh, they're pretty interested in getting, the 27th, 30th pick in the draft, and then the 27th or the 25th or whatever it ends up being in those least favorable situations. That ain't it. I think it Butler number one. It's just kind of that is just. I was trying to think like, can you remember the last move that seemed to be this obviously like a precursor to another trade move? You know what I mean? Like that, this is so obviously to me, they have something they want to do. They need to get stuff to push it over the finish line. And this is that stuff. Like I think it's most obviously going to be Butler, but like, to your point, the like 1B is now you can incentivize someone to take on Nurkic, or you can attach this to Grayson Allen or whoever else you want to move to try to improve the roster. It just feels like the Butler thing though, right? And this will be stale as hell if it doesn't happen.
It does, but I'm also wondering if now were they from their end? The reporting is that they haven't gone to Bradley Beal with a trade proposal yet. And I think that's smart because why? He already knows about it, but why make that official if you haven't already, unless something's in place? Were they the ones that didn't think that giving up the 2031 first round pick was worth it? Because then in which case, is it something like, oh, you give up 25 and 29 to get Jimmy Butler, and then you can turn around and I'll just use Detroit as an example. Would they take on Nurkic, send you back someone in exchange for that 2027 first round pick? So did this enable them to maybe do 2 things, which would be get Jimmy Butler and then also get off Yusuf Nurkic's money?
Maybe that's it. I guess, yeah, then it's both of those first 2 options that you brought up. I guess I don't want to take us too far afield, but like, we would agree, wouldn't we, that the 2031 pick is just objectively more valuable than obviously any single one of these least favorable picks that they're getting back. So it's like, well, why wouldn't, say, Miami just want that 2031 as opposed to if, say, you're trading all 3 of these to get in a Butler deal. Why wouldn't, or even if it's only 2, why wouldn't Miami want an unprotected 2031 as opposed to like a couple picks that are going to be in the late 20s or mid 20s at best?
I think there are 2 reasons. One of which is Pat Riley's 100 years old and
Sure.
probably isn't thinking about 2031. The other one would be because they're trying to stay competitive without Jimmy Butler. Are they more interested in getting either some immediate talent or just more immediate picks that they can flip, or there's a third or fourth team involved that are bringing them someone they're taking on Beal, and you're getting a better player or better fitting player than Beal. I also think so. Let's talk about the value of the picks first. And the Jazz traded one of these knowing it's going to be number 30. So they've traded a 30th overall first round pick and then 2 least favorable first round picks where, yes, you could say we don't know where those teams are going to be in 2027, 2029. But not only is it least favorable, it's a least favorable of 3 teams. Right. And so the odds of, I would argue, all of those picks will be 20 or later. And so while you could say that maybe Phoenix will figure it out and they'll be good by then, you make this trade because you think you're getting a lottery pick is how I would frame it in 2031. Now, if you're Utah, I think you also look at it this way. We have multiple, like there are only certain teams I think could do this. You have multiple picks in those years. You're not keeping all those first anyway. So why not take the bigger swing? If another team did something like this where they didn't have multiple first round picks, you're not only depleting your asset well, but you're increasing the variance of the outgoing pick while doing so. And so I do think that the 2031, that will end up being the highest pick that ends up conveying in this draft. Whether it's worth it, could it be number 18 instead of number 10? Sure. But I think that's why Utah makes it. And I know this was some of the points that were made in the Discord is you could point to some trades where it's, well, those Clippers picks don't look like they're going to be that good going to OKC. My pushback on that would be, one, we're kind of still waiting on the out years, like 26 and 27. But I think when the difference to me here is the Suns are trying to maximize a window where Kevin Durant's already age 36. Right. Bradley Beal's already a net negative. And when the Clippers made that trade, I don't know that perception of a trade has changed more, maybe annually, but just in the time that has passed since, because if I remember correctly, I would have said that probably, the Clippers just opened their title window for the next decade. So who cares about those picks? And this isn't like, this is more similar to like what Boston was able to get out of Brooklyn. And like, I think it'll be more fascinating to maybe revisit trades like what the Knicks did with the Nets. Maybe what the Timberwolves did with Rudy Gobert, not so much what the Cleveland Cavaliers did with Donovan Mitchell, because like he was younger and you also had these younger players around him. So I do think the 2031 pick will end up being like, I think the Jazz specifically inoculated themselves against like enough high variance outcomes here to where I would be shocked if we don't look back and say, relative to where those other 3 picks landed, that it wasn't at least worth trying to get 2031. And finally, because I know you're itching to say something, future trade value is part of it. Like as of right now, the Jazz can point to and say, look at this thing could be anything. Look at how bad the Suns are going to be. So that pick for the next 2 or 3 years is definitely going to have more value than any pick that you sent out.
I think I definitely have seen, so Kevin Pelton for one, basically gamed it out that if you just sort of, you can assign an expected value to different draft picks, and the cumulative expected value of these 3 outgoing picks from Utah amount to like a number 6 overall pick, which you'd say, well, that 2031, is it going to be better than 6? Like, right. I guess not. I'm not persuaded by that. I think from Utah's perspective, specifically, this is not a free agent destination. What you need to do is draft the best player on your team. The best way to do that is to get an unprotected first round pick from a team whose latter half of this decade, I don't care like how good they are next year, the year after, it's going to be a mess because they're going to be old and bad and inflexible. Now, we'll talk about the most interesting element to me of all this, which involves Houston. But if you're the Jazz, the upside of that 2031 is just like, I don't care if some of those lesser, those other picks outgoing are like 18 or 12 or whatever. Like, I want the shot at the pick that might get me the guy that is a cornerstone, because I'm not signing that guy. I'm never going to sign that guy. There's only one way. Maybe you can trade for it. And I would argue that 2031 has more trade value than 3 first. That'll probably be in the 20s, and one's definitely way late in the 20s. So Utah's side of it, as long as you've got the stomach and the ownership and the management to be like, we're going to wait 7 years or 6 years to pay this off, then it's a no-brainer. But it makes sense for the Suns too, because they just need tools to pull off trade or, trades parentheses S. So
yeah, they're the consummate, like, we need to see what happens at this, because if they do nothing, like if they just sit on these picks,
no chance.
There's no chance.
No, I can't imagine.
But just to wrap up on the Jazz, wouldn't that like kind of enforce the value of having job stability, or maybe the value of ownership in the NBA, where you are willing to wait? Because if Danny Ainge is so secure in his position, his legacy, whatever his status in Utah, there are only, because you might have said like, well, the only other team that I feel like would have definitely done something like this would have been the Thunder, because Sam Presti is that type of cat. There might be other teams you could say, well, the Spurs are secure enough in their place, whatever. But just the sheer accumulation of picks for Utah and OKC that are not their own, and then you can combine their own with, there's the value in being able to look at the long game while still like playing. Like in the Thunder's case, there's value. They can play all the games, but Utah, you're not good enough as now. So there might have been, why would we give up a more imminent pick? Because that's just another bite at the apple. I really think that this reinforces the value, especially for teams that have all these extra first round picks in the same years, of just either job security or ownership's willingness, at least in the moment, because this could all flip on its head in years, to say, we're willing to accept that the crown jewel of this trade is not going to convey for 6-7 years, or again, even being innovative and saying, or it's one we hope to use in a trade well before then, because we're good enough to do so.
Yeah. I just think, like, I am receptive to the bites at the apple argument, because the draft is a crapshoot, and especially going that far out, you just have no idea. But it's like that an unprotected pick from a team that, to me, has among the bleakest futures in the league. That's like a gourmet, like, chocolate cake. Like, I want to bite at that. I want that one bite. I don't want like just a couple. Oh, maybe this one. I don't need bites at the apple when I have that on the table. So what I really want to talk about, unless you have more to clean up here, is, so Phoenix, like, I want to start by saying, like, I would never run a team like Phoenix has run this team over the last several years. I think it's like, this is no revelation. Deeply short-sighted, like reckless, particularly in light of the new rules that ownership and management, like, you can't claim surprise. Like, you knew enough and you did enough stuff after the rules were in place to where, like, nobody else is doing this. That's like a red flag, I feel like. So it's reckless. It's crazy. But, like, if you've got this bailout where you still have Kevin Durant, you still have Devin Booker, you're probably going to have Jimmy Butler. And I'm not saying their value goes in that order. I think Booker clearly has the most trade value. There's a team out there that's got a bunch of your own future firsts that might want a guy exactly like Devin Booker or even Kevin Durant. I don't know. If this goes bad, and who knows, I don't know what that even means. Like, the Suns are going to be really interesting the rest of this year, assuming they did all this to get Jimmy Butler. If and when this goes bad, you can still send Devin Booker to the Rockets and get your drafts back. And you're kind of like, well, that was fun. We're still okay. Right? Like, isn't that to me, that's the most interesting element of all of this, is there is like a ripcord to pull for the Suns that, like, I don't know, maybe this is something we see repeat, like this pattern of, well, we'll get nuts for a little while and then we'll just go try to get our picks back from the team that has them. Like, isn't that, like, that's a wild element in this whole thing from Phoenix's side, right?
Yeah, and you had skeeted this, that you think that Phoenix definitely had to check in with Houston. We're like, hey, like,
you guys still like Booker, right? Like, a couple years from now, maybe?
Even if you're the Suns, worst case scenario, like, if you're the Suns, and the Rockets are uniquely equipped to do this, if you just said, give us back control of all the picks of ours that you have, and we'll give you Kevin Durant and Devin Booker,
sure,
and you're sending out, so it's Fred VanVleet, and then it's Jalen Green, and, like, if you need any other salary, make it work. You have some of those non-guarantees. I'm sure there's Rockets fans that would push back against that. There are Rockets fans that seem to think that Jalen Green is better than Devin Booker, De'Aaron Fox, so that, like, the whole nine. I guess maybe he could get there one day. It is certainly not now, I don't think. But having that out for sure, insofar as it's actually available, I think does help. But I guess I have two questions here. I'm going to ask the first one about these other teams. I agree that I probably wouldn't be doing what Phoenix has done. The cardinal sin would still be the Kevin Durant trade, though. And I don't know if we were close enough to say, Like, and even with the Bradley Beal stuff, you always should have known how restrictive the no trade clause would be. But like, I think teams are still kind of realizing, oh, what these new rules are going to do. There's always unintended consequences. So it's not that I give them a pass, but I understand the decisions they made at every turn. Now, would I have made every one of them? I think they're crown failure. And I still believe that the outcome would not have changed. They should have negotiated harder with Brooklyn for Kevin Durant. Matt Ishbia came in, wanted to make a splash. I get it. It's Kevin Durant. He didn't want to go anywhere but Phoenix. Dare him to open up his list at that point. But I wanted to ask you, though, when we have the Lakers and the Warriors acting like cowardly charlatans when it comes to optimizing windows around aging stars, I have a level of respect for the Suns. I want to clarify something because Discord user B Rich pointed out something that I think was a fair critique. I understand relative to the market right now, while I'll use the Warriors as an example, why the Warriors aren't really excited to give up all their draft picks for player X. You have now said, though, over the course of multiple years, Pascal Siakam's not good enough. OG Anunoby's not good enough. We're going to do these half-ass pursuits of Paul George and Larry Markkinen, who are somehow good enough, even though Pascal Siakam wasn't good enough. You don't want to get involved in a Zach LaVine sweepstakes that might cost you Andrew Wiggins and a pick. I understand Andrew Wiggins has been good, but you're acting like cowards. And the Lakers have, and it's fine. You don't get to tell your fan base, though, that you're still trying to optimize. You don't get to sell that. And so the Lakers might be they're bigger offenders because just like they don't have the legacy titles with this LeBron James, Anthony Davis core to lean on. But when you have those teams that should be acting with more urgency for the past couple of years, and then you have a team in Phoenix that, do we agree with every move? No. Is it reckless? Maybe. But like to be there and to do that year over year to try, like maximizing the timeline of these players that are ready to win now, I do have a level of respect for it.
I get it. Like if the point is to try to win a championship, the Suns are trying harder to do that immediately than a lot of other teams. I don't know. I think we just I think fundamentally disagree on the Warriors side of it. And the fact that I view the Lakers a little differently makes me check my bias for sure. But for Golden State, I think I don't know that I would classify the Markkinen or George pursuits as half-assed. I think I can see why you would say that. To me, it was more, we have a price we think is makes sense for us to pay for players of this quality, and we're not going over that. And the hope is that at some point, the price we're willing to pay for a player of a certain level of quality, like, gets both sides to say yes. I don't know that the Warriors are in better shape if they give up what it would have taken to get Paul George. I don't know that they're in better shape if it would have been Lauri Markkinen. I certainly don't think whatever it would take to get Jimmy Butler gets them to the level of Memphis, OKC, Houston. Like, they're just not the same species of team, like as those. So like, I get why people and why you bristle at the idea of we're trying to maximize Steph's prime, and just by not doing anything, it feels like they're saying that and then they're not doing anything, or they're pretending to do something.
They've essentially, I feel like they're telegraphing when Giannis becomes available, we'll be in. I guess Giannis could force his way there, but you're never going to have the best package for him. I guess you have more picks to offer than a team like the Lakers for sure. But again, it's more about the past actions to where how many players have they decided like they weren't good enough to do this? And like they have the 2022 title. So I actually understand it. I just hate the way that the message is being conveyed. It's superficial. It's fake. And I don't know. The one thing I will push back on you, I don't know how you don't consider the Larry Markkinen pursuit half-assed when it's like, well, we don't really want to give up multiple firsts or pods. Like, oh, all right.
I think if it's me, this is me, so it's not them. I think you're looking at how much better does Markkinen make us? Is that like what level of team do we become with Markkinen at the number that's going to take to keep him? And I think they correctly concluded like not good enough. So like, I think
go ahead. Sorry.
It's a really hard argument to make if you're like, we're just waiting for Giannis, because it's like, well, you're going to be waiting forever probably. So like, I think if I could get on board with you about one aspect of this, it's that the Warriors are not being direct maybe about what they really intend to do, which is, I think, make sure that there's not a gross bottoming out or like bleak half decade Like, I think inside they all know this is fucking over as like a contending outfit. And they don't want to be really bad if they try to go make this into a contender and fail and then have to deal with the outcome of that. I think they're, in a way, it's like almost like there's an unrealistic level of ambition because what they're trying to do is like have it both ways, which has been an issue for this organization with 2 timelines and stuff. They're like, we're gonna call it lip service if you want. We're gonna like explore, no brainer. Yes, we'll take that guy trade options, which won't materialize. We're gonna not fire all our bullets. We're gonna hope that's enough to like keep fans in the seats and keep Steph happy enough. And then when it's over, we're still going to have a full clip. Like we can actually build a good team again. I think that's really what's happening. But a team is never going to say, hey, we're going to kind of float for a couple of years, guys. Still show up though and watch us.
I guess I just don't understand. I don't want to spend more time on the words. I guess just don't, like a Levine case. If you're concerned about keeping the slate clean, you can probably get Zach LaVine for this year's first round pick and salary. And if you're saying, well, we can't get rid of Andrew Wiggins doesn't matter then to your big picture. You're going to have a higher ceiling with a Zach LaVine. And so I think there's been a lack of commitment to even finding middle ground options where it's, we'll give up seconds for Dennis Schroeder.
Yeah.
So
I think they just don't want. So let's maybe to tie it back to Phoenix. Phoenix is real comfortable with what could otherwise be termed as reckless moves, like call them bold if you want, or like high risk, high reward behavior. This Warriors team is just not. They're just more. That's not the way that they're being run. And I think, I don't know, the Suns, the fallout of this Suns thing may be instructive, and maybe it'll be like, maybe you should just go for it because who knows what can happen, right? I think that's a possibility.
Well, they're probably obligated to do this, but is there a level of, do you think that they're good enough or would have the ceiling enough with Jimmy Butler that if this is the reason that because if it's like, are they sending, it's so hard to know without understanding what the outcome is, but did they do this saying they were going to send all 3 picks just out and that's how they get Jimmy Butler? Or is it, like I said, where they're kind of staggering it, where we're figuring out a way to get Jimmy Butler while also maybe lopping off a contract like a Yusuf Nurkic that we don't want in a separate trade?
I think, again, initially I would have said, this is just for Butler. Miami said, we want 3 firsts. Go figure out how to do it. But in that scenario, I think, again, Pat Riley's age is the thing. If I'm the Heat, I want the 2031 if that's on the table. I don't want these 3 other picks. So it does seem maybe like the Suns are saying, we'll send you 2. We'll use another one to move Nurkic, and we get better in ways that go beyond Jimmy Butler being added to the team. I think that's a possibility. I think that that's the
outcome. Sorry. Does that change your perception of this trade a great deal?
It depends on what happens with that other pick that hypothetically is going out with Nurkic or whoever to get a better player.
Like Detroit's not giving you Stewart for Nurkic and
if you come out of this as the Suns with Isaiah Stewart and Jimmy Butler
and no Nurkic,
I'll take back a lot of what I said, and no Nurkic. I'll walk back a lot. I mean, because that would be phenomenal. I think the only certainty is that this is clearly a Jimmy Butler precursor. I think then the question is that all, which is where we started with this. And I guess we'll just see.
With that, you ready to take us out of here?
Yeah. Thanks everybody. This is a really interesting trade, and this may be stale in 10 seconds after the Suns actually do something with these picks. Let us know what you think. Tell us what you think the plan is, or which of the plans proposed seems most likely. As always, if you're watching this on YouTube, comment, subscribe there. Leave us a nice little thumbs up, leave us good reviews, 5 stars wherever you're listening. Rate, review, subscribe, all that usual stuff. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Shouts Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.